Senator Waters.
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions about the National Nuclear Waste Dump, the National Radioactive Waste Management Project. Do you have the right people here? Is that yourself, Mr Wilson? Great. Is it correct that there have not been any additional nominations to host the National Radioactive Waste Facility?
That's correct.
Okay. Is the department or the government actively seeking further nominations?
At the time that the previous minister announced the taking forward of the current site at Barniuda, he indicated that the government remained open to nominations, and that's the government's position. We haven't actively solicited for new nominations.
Okay. Thank you. What community notification or consultation process would the department use in the event of any future nominations?
We would use largely a process, I believe, that was similar to the previous process. That is, a nomination would come into to the minister. We would assess whether it was valid. We would assess it against criteria to advise the minister as to whether or not it was within scope. The minister then would have to make a decision about whether he wished to formally consider the nomination, and if he wished to formally consider it, he would have to open a public consultation period under the Act of no shorter period than 60 days.
Okay. Thank you. Is the department revisiting or considering any of the other sites that were not, that were nominated but not shortlisted?
Not at present, no, Senator.
Okay. And is there any time frame around closing nominations, a point at which you'll no longer remain open to them?
Under the Act, Senator, the minister is able to, or nominations are able to be received and considered up to the point that the government makes a decision on the final preferred site.
Okay. So is it not at that stage yet?
No, Senator, we're quite some way from that. We have a single site which we're undertaking further assessments on.
Okay.
At the end of that assessment process, the government will be making a decision about whether it is the preferred site. There then needs to be a little more technical work and regulatory assessments before it is classified under the Act as a final site.
Okay. So even though it's the only one left in the current process, it's not yet the preferred site, nor is it yet the final site.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. So what's the plan B if that site falls through?
It's not to say we don't have a plan B, but we haven't actually considered and put one down. There are a range of options that could be undertaken. We could go back to previous sites. We could call for new nominations. There are a range of options that could be considered. We're not actively planning for any of those. We're working hard to progress the current site.
Okay, thank you. Has the minister met with any of the traditional owners of the nominated area or representative bodies?
So, Senator, a couple of weeks ago I had planned to. I was in Adelaide and ready to go, and then that storm hit. We lost power, and my charter flight the next morning was cancelled to get up to Hawker. We still, Mr Wilson was already up there experiencing the wild weather, so he helped facilitate a telephone conference with representatives from the Adnyamathanha peoples and I've made a commitment to return physically. I also had intended to meet other community representatives on the same visit. That didn't happen. But in a couple of weeks' time, in early November, I'll be going back.
Back to the site.
Back to the site physically.
Okay, in a couple of weeks. Okay. Is there, or rather, what is the anticipated timeframe for the Cultural Heritage Survey and the related cultural assessments at the present site? And is there a start and finish date for those?
We are currently negotiating with the traditional owners of the land around that site, the Adnyamathanha, through their nominated representatives. At this point, we don't have a start or a finish date. It's a process that we very consciously have them driving. We're currently negotiating terms of reference and a process for that. Hopefully that can be finalised in the near future.
Sorry, did you say negotiating terms of reference for that process?
Terms of reference for the heritage survey and you know, who will be undertaking it and the timeframes and the methods that will be used.
Okay, do you have a preferred time
Could I
frame?
just, well, mate, you can answer that.
We would prefer it happen sooner rather than go on for a long period of time, but it will take as long as it takes.
Okay.
Could I just add, in the conversations I had with Regina McKenzie and others that in the community that are very interested in the heritage assessment, I am very keen to ensure that this heritage assessment provides benefits to the Adnyamathanha peoples, independent of what might happen on the waste facility itself. They have done some work with the South Australian Government over the last few years, mapping their cultural heritage, but this process should give them a much greater assessment of those heritage sites over a broader area of the particular Barndiuta location. So it would be better to be driven by them to focus on those areas where there are gaps in their historical, cultural and heritage knowledge. So I'm willing to allow them to take the time necessary to get that right.
Okay, thank you. So is there any on-ground work or assessments that aren't pertaining to cultural heritage that are either possible or planned at the site while those cultural heritage works are being undertaken or even negotiated?
No, Senator, and we've communicated this to the traditional owners there, that there'll be no work that disturbs the site undertaken until the heritage survey is completed.
Okay.
That's not to say that at some point there may not be people who go onto the site to look at it and maybe do surveying, but there certainly won't be any work that causes disturbance.
Okay, thank you. Given that the proposed facility is in conflict with South Australian law, which I understand precludes such a facility, what dialogue has the government, either the department or yourself, Minister, had with the South Australian agencies, government agencies?
We've had some dialogue. It's been fairly limited. The South Australian bureaucracy has, of course, the laws that it must operate under, which prohibit it from working towards the establishment of a facility. But we've had a number of meetings, only a handful, not many really, and the nature of those meetings has been to update them on our process. There's certainly no, how can I put it, cooperative approach on this in that sense.
Okay. So how do you propose to get around that restriction?
Well, if I could add, Senator Waters, my understanding is that the South Australian Government have expressed some support for the change. I was due to meet Minister Koutsantanis around 40 minutes before the lights, 40 minutes after the lights went out in South Australia. He's also the Energy Minister in South Australia, so that meeting did not proceed. But suffice, as I say, there's been a level of political support or acceptance of the need to progress this, and I understand there's some proposed legislative changes being considered at the South Australian Parliament.
Oh, I see. I didn't realise that was before that. Is that at
I
stage,
don't
or?
know much more than that. That did come up in
Okay.
other discussions I had with parliamentarians in Adelaide that I was able to meet with, but that's obviously a matter for them.
Okay, thank you. Now moving to the Regional Consultative Committee, I understand applications for membership have closed. How many applications were received?
26, Senator.
26. Okay, and what was the what was the spread of those? Geography, demographic, gender, etc. Applications.
I can take that on notice. I don't have the answers with me right now, but we did get a range of candidates from hawker, corn, male, female, and across the stakeholder interest groups. So
Okay.
we're very happy with the range that we received.
Okay, what's the process from here, and when will an announcement of the composition of that RCC be made?
We are currently providing finalising advice up to the Minister for a decision on the committee. I hope that will be soon. But,
I'll act as promptly as I can once I receive that advice.
Okay, so we're talking a matter of weeks?
sorry, Senator?
We're talking a matter of weeks? Or
I
more
would-
like months?
No, I would imagine a matter of weeks.
Matter of weeks, okay, thank you. And how is the department managing any emerging conflicts of interest between people applying for the community grants and people nominating for the consultative committee?
Well, I think it's important to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr Wilson, that the final decision on any funding any projects will be a ministerial one. The consultative committee is to provide advice to me in that matter, and I believe we are engaging Oz Industry in this process as well.
Yeah.
Mr Wilson, is that correct? You might be able to provide more information.
Senator, we have very consciously set the community program fund up within a separate area in the department. That's Oz Industry who are managing that. We will obviously through our processes of due diligence in taking this forward ensure that any conflicts of interest are appropriately managed in the committee at the time. It's also important to note that the committee is not making any decisions on these projects.
The Minister is, yes,
Yeah.
he said that, thank you. So does that mean there won't be a barrier between someone being on the consultative committee and applying for a community grant, but that you'll have some kind of process to manage that conflict somehow?
That's right. These committees always have conflict of interest procedures, and this one won't be any different.
Okay. Thank you. I understand that the applications for the Community Benefit Program closed about mid-August. How many applications were received?
Senator Diane Fraser, General Manager Structural
Hello.
Adjustment in Oz Industry. We received 17 applications for the fund, and they were seeking funding of 2.8 million.
Okay. And how many of those have been assessed so far?
We've assessed all of them as being eligible, and Oz Industry has done a preliminary assessment. However, those assessments can't be finalised until we have the view of the consultative committee.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So once the consultative committee is appointed and then able to provide advice on those applications, is that when a decision can be made?
Then the assessments will be finalised, and they'll go to the program delegate for the fund, who's the general manager in Oz Industry with responsibility for the fund.
Okay. And does the minister tick off on those, or will it stop
No,
at that
goes
person
to
in
the
the
general
fund?
manager. Yeah.
Okay, the fund. And the criteria for making those decisions, are they recorded somewhere?
There are program guidelines which are on the site, on the business.gov.au site,
Okay.
and I can go through them if you like.
Perhaps if you could just send me the link on
Okay,
notice so I
send you
can
one.
have
But
a look
just
at those.
quickly, capacity and capability to carry out the project, the benefit to the community the project will achieve, and the value for money. So they're fairly straightforward.
Okay, that's it, is
Send
it?
you the link. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great, thank you. And what's the capacity of the fund? You said 2.8 had been applied for. What's the total amount in the fund?
$2 million.
$2 million.
Two. Okay, so not everyone will get a prize. Okay. And again, roughly what timeframe do you think the successful applicants will be notified by, if it's a matter of weeks till the committee's appointed?
Well, yeah, we have to establish the consultative committee obviously first.
Matter of months,
I-
by the sounds?
Well, we're thinking that the committee will probably meet by the middle of next month. So I'm thinking it would be early in the new year that we were able to announce the grant applications.
Okay, great. And has the minister met with or received correspondence from any other individuals, organisations or stakeholder groups local to the site? And who? And was this either in favour of or opposed to continuing
You say met
discussions?
with and received correspondence? Well, I certainly have received correspondence from a variety of people on the matter, and have responded to much of that correspondence. On that visit I had planned, I was to meet a range of landowner groups, business groups, the local GP, a variety of whom are for or against the project. As I say, I am returning there in a couple of weeks, so I haven't seen the agenda, but I presume it'll be very similar to what I was intending to do a couple of weeks ago.
Could you please take on notice to provide a list of the people who have sent correspondence to you and likewise that you've responded to?
We can take that on notice.
Thank you. Now, the department stated on the website...
Just to clarify, Senator Waters, I might just, if I can, maybe narrow that for us if it's possible. We might try and take on notice those local community affected. Obviously, I get correspondence on this from...
Yes. Yes, thank you. That's
primary school
reasonable.
students and others, and some of it also
That's
goes
reasonable.
to the South Australian Government Royal Commission process, not necessarily the low-level and intermediate waste facility
Yes.
we're seeking to establish. So I might, if it's okay for you, just narrow that for
Yes,
for-
thank
for
you.
my
Let's start
department
with that
staff,
and
yeah.
and I'll come back if
Yep.
I need some more there.
Can I just interrupt you? Just remind you that it's now
Thank
10:35 and that Senator Ketter has about 15 minutes worth of questions on 2.3 and we've got to get to NOPSEMA
Okay,
before 11.
I might just have two more
Two
questions
more
then.
questions.
Thank you. I'll put the rest on notice. So can you provide an update, please, on the status of the current extended interim storage expansion works at the Lucas Heights facility? Yes, thank you.
Look, I think that will be a matter for ANSTO. I'm sorry, Senator.
Okay. So is that
I don't
not
know if
being-
we could provide you.
Is that not being reflected into the business case for the South Australian
So
site?
ANSTO are very much involved in the information advice we're getting on establishing this facility, and obviously they'd be a customer, if you like, of the facility if established. But their detailed plans at Lucas Heights really need to be directed to them.
Okay, thank you. So could you answer the status of the detailed business case that KPMG is undertaking, or again, is that something for ANSTO?
Part of the detailed business case that we are working up to take into the government processes will include examination of the co-location of the interim store and factors such as the storage at Lucas Heights and other storage facilities around Australia will be taken into account in that process.
All right, look, I'll put my other questions on notice. Some of them go to that process and what's involved in scoping it. Thanks for your